And the way I want to start this is I'm basically going to be speaking about discrimination. My personal experience in discrimination, but the experiences and what I've learned in recent years to change that. Then I want to talk about discrimination by Canadians, discrimination by us white Anglo-Saxons against First Nations, against the Aboriginal people of Canada. But my main message is one that's very positive, and I want to talk about my personal experience to do with a First Nations model in economic development. One that I think could help break down this culture of dependency that we've created. Something that I think could have significant ramifications right across the country of Canada and is having significant impact here in Cape Breton right now. I grew up a kilometer away from where we are now, a kilometer away from Membertou First Nation. When I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I never came to Membertou. There was no reason for me to come here or for my friends to come here. We just didn't recognize, and I didn't know any Indians. Then, all of a sudden, I found, not all of a sudden, it took many years, but in 2008, I found that I was in the position of being president of the Sydney and Area Chamber of Commerce and working here in Membertou. Something dramatically different, something very dramatic had changed. And what I see now is that a place like Membertou and First Nations are now taking a very significant leadership role in economic development for our whole community. So a few things that I've been learning that I don't know if you're aware of or not, but some elders in the communities have told me that up until the 1960s, they weren't allowed to go to school beyond grade 8. Can you imagine? Like education, you hear this cliche all the time, education is the key to unlock opportunity, to success, to self-determination, whatever. They weren't allowed. In the 1920s, our city fathers, our grandparents, great-grandparents, recognized that Sydney Harbour was of great value, and the Aboriginal people lived along Sydney Harbour. They made them move. They moved them up to Swamp area, which is where we are now. You've got to give them credit for what they've turned this into. Because of the Indian Act, an Aboriginal can't own the home they live in. They can't own the land, so they can't use it as collateral. You and I, we may want to start our own business. We put our house up for collateral, go to the bank, and we have some cash to work with to start a business. It's not that simple. For a similar reason, they can't get a bid bond. So if they have a construction company and they want to bid on multi-million-dollar contracts at the Sydney Tar Ponds, say, they can't get bid bonds, or it's really, really difficult. So a lot of this is still dictated by the Indian Act. And to me, we've set up a formula, did an exquisite job of creating dependency. Some of you are probably saying, well, that's kind of similar to all of Cape Breton in some ways. So in the last century, the Mi'kmaq people, the Aboriginals of Cape Breton, were not part of the Industrial Revolution that we had in Cape Breton, where we had some 5,000 people working in the steel mill, perhaps 12,000, I think it was, people working in the coal mines. There were practically no Aboriginals working there. Now, as Rob referred to, we're looking at building a new economy here in Cape Breton. And things are changing, and a lot of us are looking back and saying, well, we're better off now. And to see First Nations, especially a community like Membertou, taking a leadership role, as you can see around us here, in turning around our economy, it's pretty significant. And I like referring to what they call the Mi'kmaq people of the dawn. So I like to see this as what I'm talking about is the dawn of a new age. My wife and I were fortunate enough a couple of years ago to attend a speech by President Bill Clinton in Halifax. And the one thing I took away from that speech was that most of the time we know what to do. The problem usually isn't what to do, it's the how. Just what are some of the steps you can take to really make a difference. So as far as my position, I do work with the 5 First Nation communities here in Cape Breton. So I'm the Executive Director of the Unama'ki Economic Benefits Office. Unama'ki in the Mi'kmaq language basically means Cape Breton. The big thing that I want to emphasize here that this is community driven. It's not driven by government. There's a steering committee like our board of directors. There's 2 or 3 representatives from each of the communities. They drive this, and they are really proud of what's happening here, and they're very engaged in all of this. We're looking at a collaborative approach to economic development between the 5 communities, which is important, but then maybe more important, a collaborative approach with government and with business. So one of the things that our office is focused on is this idea of MOUs. There's a lot of good intention out there. Those of us that were discriminating, usually we don't even realize it. It's the other party being offended. Quite often they've negotiated MOUs with large industry and government. And they always sound good, great photo ops, and I know something about that. But in most cases, when you look back a few years later, there's very little tangible benefits or jobs for First Nations. So that's part of our intent. Our job is to turn those good intentions into reality, into actual concrete jobs. So the focus of our office, just in summary, taking a collaborative approach, a business-like approach. We're identifying new economic opportunities. That's important. Understanding industry's needs. What does industry need? And then work to fill those needs. That's simple. But there's another element that we have going, that we have a staff that we're providing ongoing support. That support is also very important. I'm going to talk a little bit more about. It's about building capacity. When a people haven't been part of the Industrial Revolution, don't have that experience, there has to be capacity building. So we've gotten some recognition over time of what we've done. The immediate opportunity that sort of brought this about was the Sydney Tar Ponds Cleanup Project. The legacy of 100 years of steelmaking in our community, but it's $400 million being spent. To a business person, that's opportunity. So what do? Some of the leadership in the communities, they negotiated with government, and government agreed, okay, we want to have meaningful Aboriginal participation in the cleanup. So there was a leap of faith needed here. Try something. And there was an opportunity to build capacity, build experience, but perhaps most importantly is that word at the end, confidence. When people have confidence and believe they can succeed, it's really hard to stop them. And that's one of the problems we have in our community right now. Too many naysayers. Rob mentioned that. So the leadership negotiated this agreement for meaningful participation. But then the question is, what the heck is meaningful? So to me, clearly what was done in the past didn't work. So you had to be innovative. You had to try something different. So it was decided to have a pilot project, the cooling pond, part of the Tar Ponds project. It was clear in talking to many people, politicians and others, that they really thought this would fail. Okay, we'll give you this token project, see if it works, but they're going to fall flat in their face. Anyway, it was an amazing success. A couple of the things that made it a little bit innovative was that rather than only Aboriginal companies or majority owned could bid on the contract, but rather than one company win it, we said we want 3 companies, the top 3 companies, to be part of this and share in the contract, with the top bidder getting a higher percentage. And also federally, the federal government in their Aboriginal procurement policy, they say that, well, you have to have a minimum of 30% Aboriginal employment on these set-asides. We said, well, if you want meaningful, let's strive for 75%. Let's be really meaningful. It ended up being 82% when it was finished. So then government, we said, okay, we did the pilot project. You say yourself, and we have quotes from them saying that it was a resounding success. What are you going to do now? It was then agreed to put aside $19 million worth of contracts at the Tar Ponds. And we said, we have to know in advance what those contracts are going to be so we can prepare for them over the next 4 or 5 years. You can't come to us at the last minute and say, well, here's a contract, go do it. We won't succeed in doing it that way. But perhaps most importantly was some of these companies, the experience they gained by giving that opportunity, they started bidding on contracts outside the set-aside that everybody was bidding on. There's Aboriginal companies now participating in $72 million in contracts at the Tarpon. Now that's significant. Communication is really important. People have to hear and know what's happening. We hear too much of the negative. Second, this is basically what it looks like now, the south pond of the Tarpons. It's right in the middle of our city. That's what it looked like. And that's what it's looking like now. So it's huge. So the Tarpons is coming to an end, though. In early 2014, it will be complete. Thank God. But what as far as this economic development effort, as far as First Nations, what happens then? One thing that our steering committee realized is that, again, education is key. Only allowed to go to grade 8 before, that roadblock's gone. So what can we do there? We put together a very detailed training proposal, training plan, and luckily we were funded by HRSDC, and it's a multi-million-dollar, multi-year training initiative. So we're able to help with training and direct that and provide the support that's needed. This ASAP program, Aboriginal Skills Employment Partnership. Some of the programs that we would offer when we talk to industry or engineering companies, and they'd say, well, we need people doing environmental monitoring. We put together programs. We need civil tech workers. There's no program here in Cape Breton anymore, and it's hard to get workers of that level. So we started training some people there, so they're getting jobs. So we're looking at broadening the horizons, moving beyond the Tarpons. So we focus on, as the Tarpons enable us, we're now focused on identifying new opportunities, as I said earlier, working to understand industry needs and working to fill those needs. It's really important to sort of try to simplify that and understand it really is that simple. But what are some of the opportunities? One interesting story I like to tell is one of our partners, NewPage, and we have several big industry partners now. NewPage has a plant in the other side of the island, Port Hawkesbury, some 500-600 workers working there. Good paying jobs in their plant. Not one Aboriginal. Not one. So we started meeting with them. It took probably a year and a half or more trying to cultivate a partnership and an understanding and a trust. And they said, well, we want to hire Aboriginals, but they just don't know how to engage. And there's the mentality of, oh, that won't work, and you know all the other things that people would say. So we finally said, look, if you're willing to try something different, we'll lay out a process, we'll engage you right from the start in the promotion, the design of the training, the recruitment, the actual training, the hiring, the whole kit and caboodle. We'll work with you on this. And we'll provide support to the individuals to make sure they don't fall through the cracks. They said, okay. Well, now there's 3 Aboriginals working there, and we just started a new program, and they're committing to hire another 4, maybe as many as 10. Now, you may say, well, 4 jobs, what's 4 jobs, Owen? You're really like pushing this. Well, you get 4 jobs here and 4 jobs there and 4 jobs there. It starts to add up. And when some of these communities are in poverty, that makes a huge difference. So this is how, as I said, how we kind of engage them in the process. And the support. Like, we have staff that speak the Mi'kmaq language. Sometimes you talk to an Aboriginal and they're sort of talking, their English is a little broken in that. Well, that's because Mi'kmaq is their first language in most of their communities. So they're bilingual. You probably aren't. So maybe they're smarter than you. So some of our staff speak the Mi'kmaq language. They know the culture. They know the communities. They know what the people in the communities need, and they know what the challenges are. That infrastructure has to be in place for people to succeed. And I just want to drive this home, that it's community driven. They've really bought into this and take pride and ownership in this. And I believe that people have to be held accountable. Judge us by our results. $19 million in set-asides at the Tarpons, $72 million in contracts Aboriginals now participating in. We leveraged $3.5 million for training, and we're still delivering that. And we can document person by person and company by company over 160 jobs that we've created so far through this initiative. For 5 small, relatively small communities, Membertou was doing pretty good anyway. This is broadening and going way beyond that. So it's important, what I'm trying to get at, it's not enough to just identify the opportunities. And it's not enough for government or industry to just say, okay, we'll promise some jobs. It's not even enough then to promise training. Those are all important, but then you need that infrastructure, that support, especially when people have been kept out on the outside for so long. Or else what you're doing is setting people up for failure. And we don't want to go there again. So there's that need for a new approach. And I think that's kind of the theme of this TED Talk. So industry now is coming to us, and they're saying, we have an aging workforce, and we need skilled workers. And they're starting to see the Aboriginal communities with their growing population. They're, as Dan Christmas, who I look at as my mentor now and a good friend, he referred to it as a tsunami of young Aboriginals. So their industry's starting to see the Aboriginal communities now as a potential source for these skilled workers. But they're still having a struggle with the how. Amera Utility Service, another example. But Amera Utility Service, we get a call from them. They said, we heard about your success. We need skilled workers. We're in the same boat. We want to engage Aboriginals. Honestly, we do, but we don't know how. So we sat down. We went through the whole process. 10 individuals were put through training. Some of their senior management came down, and the training's through like accredited institutions, Nova Scotia Community College, Marconi, and the Straight Campus and that. 10 went through the training. They committed to hire 4. We usually train twice as many so they can pick and choose, because there can be other personality issues, or they want to pick the best people for their industry. That's fine. Their senior management came down and said, we're so pleased. Is it okay if we hire every one of them? And we're just starting a new training program. And these kind of partners that are growing and keeping on going, it's always a challenge. Things change in the economy pretty quickly. But there's no reason why we can't put on training programs every year for companies like this. Another big initiative is, how do you get more Aboriginals engaged in science and in business? It's one thing to train people for, get them jobs in the trades. That's important too. But what about the higher level? Well, we identified that energy and the environment are of critical importance globally. So how do we play a role there as far as First Nations? Our local university, Cape Breton University, is now building a new center for sustainability and energy in the environment. We thought, okay, let's partner with somebody that really does have the expertise, that's growing, is very ambitious, what they want to do. So now we have 2 young Aboriginals working as researchers with that center. Port development, we're all hearing about port development in Sydney, the possibility of a container terminal. What we do with these industries, we go department by department with their HR people and say, okay, who works in this department? What do they do? What education do they get? Do they need? What pay do they get? Are there going to be openings soon? And we created a database. So we have a database prepared now. So when a container terminal is built in our city, we're going to be ready to play a significant role in that. When you talk $6.2 billion, that's an opportunity. We want to be ready for that and explore how that could impact Cape Breton. So the conclusion is, it's time to take a different approach. Take that leap of faith and understand that what's good for First Nations can be good for all of Canada. In business terms, that investment could have great returns on it. And probably most importantly is that mess that we created in the beginning, perhaps it's an opportunity for us to work with First Nations to help correct that somewhat. Thank you.